everyone. Hi, Rishabh.
Good morning, Priya.
Good morning. Hey, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. And we hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving break. And for folks who are joining us from Seattle, I hope you are having a beautiful snowy morning as well. So, we are so delighted to welcome you all today to our very first Azure Code IaaS Learn Live series. I'm Priya Shanmuga Vadivelu, and I'm a senior product manager in the Azure Compute team. And for the session today, I am happy to welcome my colleague and my co-presenter, Rishabh Verma. Hey, Rishabh, how are you doing again?
I'm doing very well. Thanks a lot, Priya. Super excited to be here with you, and we have wonderful content for our audience, and looking forward to it.
Yeah. So, Rishabh, this is a live session, right? So, and I think you are as excited as me to know where our learners are coming from. So, folks, just drop a hi in the chat with your name and where you're coming from. We'd love to actually learn about you.
Absolutely.
All right. Can move to the next slide. So, folks, again, this is a live session, and we'd like to keep it as interactive as possible with you today. So, keep posting your questions in the chat, and Rishabh and I will try to get as much as we can. But we also have subject matter experts and moderators in the chat who are going to help answer your questions in real time. So, keep posting your questions, and that's going to be like a great fun for us today.
Absolutely. If I may add something there, Priya, if this were not remote, we'd be all sitting next to each other in
Yeah.
an auditorium. So in the virtual world, feel free to interact. We want to keep this conversational. We'll try to get as many questions as we can.
Yep. Awesome. So, Rishabh, do you know what we're going to talk about today?
Yeah, no, we have a really exciting topic today. Something that both you and I we work as part of in Azure. Today we'll be introducing the audience to the Azure virtual machines,
Yeah.
and hopefully, as you can see on the screen, there's a link to a Learn Live session altogether. So for audience members who are interested, we encourage you to come follow along with us in this exercise. We have a lot of good content. And we'll try to keep a slow pace so that you can just follow us as we go along.
Yeah, so folks, as Rishabh mentioned, the topic for our session today is Introduction to Virtual Machines. And this is part of the module in the Azure Learn website. So you could actually log into this Learn module by accessing the URL there, aka.ms/learnlive-2022-1201A, or you could actually access the module by scanning the QR code as well. And feel free to follow the module along with us. As the name indicates, this is like a 101 session. We're going to start really from the basics. And so there are technically no prerequisites for you to take this module with us today. So come sit back and enjoy learning with us.
Awesome. I'll move on to the next slide. So what is our learning objective today? How do we summarize that?
Yeah, Rishabh. So we have picked up wonderful set of topics for our session today. And here's what we're going to actually start with. So we'll start discussing about what are the set of components or resources that is associated with a virtual machine. And for the session today, Rishabh, let's focus also on the Windows-based Azure virtual machines. And then we'll move on to discuss about what are the different ways to create and deploy a virtual machine. And as you may know, there are going to be like different set of options that we will briefly cover for our learners. But folks, we are also going to specifically dive into one specific option, which is to create a virtual machine through the Azure portal. And wait for the demonstration of a live demonstration of that. And then, Rishabh, you would know that availability of service and or availability of a service or application is like a critical aspect for our customers, right? So we'll also walk through the different options and ways to manage the availability of virtual machines. And finally, we will cover about a set of backup recovery options that's available in Azure to manage the deployment and maintenance of the applications. So we have like a full packed agenda, and I'm sure it's going to be fun. Are you ready to get started?
Absolutely. And I think, as you said, Priya, like by the end of this, hopefully for those who watch this video, they'll understand the fundamentals of Azure VMs, and will be hopefully we can equip them to go about and creating their own virtual machines. So hang on tight, and hopefully that you enjoy that learning.
Yep.
I'll move on to the next slide.
Yeah. All right. So, Rishabh, before we get started into the details, right, like what are the different components of a virtual machine, which was one of the topics we wanted to discuss, can you tell our learners about what are Azure virtual machines?
Absolutely. I think starting right from the scratch, right? So
Yeah.
allow me to go to the next slide and let's kick that off. Right. So Azure VMs, by definition, they are on-demand scalable computing resources. If I may sort of speak in more layman terms, um, imagine going to like a store and buying yourself a PC or buying yourself a desktop, right? Azure virtual machines are essentially doing the same thing, but rather than buying the physical machine, you're buying the virtual machine, as the name implies. But what that means is you're connecting remotely to a server or a computer or a PC or a desktop sitting at an Azure data center right from your home. On a nutshell, that's what it means. Essentially, virtual machines, they help you create dedicated compute resources. As I said, you can they're just a few clicks of buttons away from you, and they can be used just like a physical desktop that you have at your home. If you plan on hosting a server, you can do that as well. And I think another comment I'll make is whenever you think about virtual machines, I'd like the audience to think about three fundamental pillars that come into it. It's the compute, which includes the processor and the memory. It's the storage as well as the networking. We'll be doing a deep dive on all of these three pillars shortly, but it's very important to note that whenever you deploy a virtual machines, these three pillars are fundamental, similar to your desktop and your PC.
Yeah, awesome. So that is like a very easy way to get access to the compute resources without requiring to physically own the machine, right? And it's just hosted in minutes, available to you in like minutes or seconds from Azure data center. So that's so cool, actually. So let's probably actually dive into a little bit more details now. So we talked about what are virtual machines and what are the three pillars and components that actually get associated with a virtual machine briefly. Can you tell us about like what virtual machines types are available in Azure? How does our portfolio look like?
Absolutely. Allow me to move to my next slide and let's talk about the Azure portfolio. Um, so, right, folks, before I even go into this, right, like virtual machines is not a new concept. I was actually Googling last night and I found that it's almost a 3-decade-old technology,
Yeah.
right? And so it's something that's existed, but what's new in the public cloud space, especially from folks like us in Azure, is the ability or to deploy and pick and choose exactly the kind of machine you require for your workloads. And that's essentially what we're trying to showcase here as well. In this slide, you see certain buckets of products, our product portfolio from Azure Virtual Machines altogether that we offer. And today you have these 8 different buckets that you can pick and choose based on your needs. If I may just define the 8 different buckets, the first bucket is entry level. The second bucket is burstable, going from left to right. So these two products are sort of close to my heart because I am actually the PM for these two products, followed by general purpose and confidential computing buckets. We've got wonderful products in the compute intensive bucket as well. Memory optimized, GPU accelerated, high performance computing, storage optimized, all sort of different flavors of compute resources that you can pick and choose on Azure Public Cloud altogether. Lastly, as you may see on sort of the bottom aspect is you see names of different processor vendors. The reason why we put that there is we'd like to communicate that all these buckets can be adopted on different flavors of CPU processors as well. Certain customers, certain individuals have a preference on one versus the other. We'd like you to know that Azure has one solution for you, which hopefully everybody can adopt.
Yeah, that is like a vast selection of the virtual machine series and CPU platform choices that Azure offers. And I love to have choices, and I'm sure everybody love, right? They like to have different choices and options to choose from. It's just the flexibility that makes you choose the right set of VMs for your workloads. But Rishabh, I'm also sure that you would realize and recognize that having many choices sometimes can also be challenging to make a quick decision or selection, especially if you're like so new to cloud or so new to Azure as well. So, do we have any recommendations on what types of virtual machine series would be suited for specific application types or
You're
workloads?
losing. We had a little network hiccup there. Hopefully you can hear me.
We are having some network interruptions, technical difficulties. I think we should be back in a few seconds.
Oh, are we back?
We're still unable to hear you exactly. No, your side. Yeah, just come in. All right, Risham, you're back.
Oh, sorry about that.
Sorry, folks.
My
We had some technical difficulties.
technical issues. Allow me to pick it up from where we left off. Hopefully, it's all smooth now. So, Priya, I think your question was how do we pick the workloads, right? I think on the last slide, if I may just quickly go back, we just talked about the different kinds of product portfolio we have. If I may just go one layer above and try to talk about what these product portfolios represent on the next slide. Yeah, so I think the goal is you always have to ask yourself, what workload are you trying to chase, right? And essentially, depending on the workload, depending on the compute resource needs that a workload has, we have these different product portfolios, which I just described in the previous one. Allow me to go step by step on the products and their workload affinity that they bring in together, right? The first sizes, the A series, B series, and D series, they all attract workloads which are sort of general purpose workloads. Think web testing, think development and research, think small to medium databases, low to medium traffic web servers. Those kind of workloads are ideal for these VMs altogether.
Yeah.
Hopefully, Priya, you can see my screen and everything.
Yeah, we're good now. Yep.
We're
Yeah.
good. Okay. Apologies. I think my computer is maybe I need a better virtual machine altogether to be able to run this.
Yeah.
The second bucket is workloads which have heavy computational tasks, medium traffic web servers, network appliances, batch processes, application servers. Priya, I think you would know better than me, but we recently talked to a customer who is running some sort of gaming web server on that workload. So F-series VMs are ideal for those kind of workloads. The next category, the third row that you see on the table, is a large, it's sort of workloads which are certain like large memory usage. Think relational databases, medium to large caches. If you want to do some in-memory analytics, our E-series, M-series, and DB2 VMs are extremely popular for those kind of workloads. We basically bucket them as the memory optimized workloads altogether. The fourth row is the storage optimized workload sort of criteria. So think sort of data storage. When you have any sort of big data workloads, SQL, NoSQL databases, and you really need that high disk throughput and IOs, the L-series VMs are ideal for such kind of workloads. And then if I may cover quickly the last two rows that we have is whenever you think about high performance compute workloads, which requires sort of heavy computational needs along with the GPU, you can workloads such as graphics rendering, video editing, model training, and I think AI and deep learning is, of course, the hot topic these days. So think N-series and H-series VMs, which can really help you optimize your workload performances.
Yeah, thank you, Rishabh. That is actually super helpful. And folks, in addition to what Rishabh mentioned, we also have something called the Azure Virtual Machine Selector, which we launched around sometime last year. And this product or a tool basically is exactly defined for the use case that Rishabh just explained, right? So there are like tons of like use cases or scenarios, application scenarios, and you might not be able to like choose the best virtual machine that you need to use for that workload. And if you're like especially new to Azure and you're trying to like explore and understand like what are the different virtual machine options that's available and what I need to choose, we would recommend you to actually check out this tool and you'll definitely thank us later. The tool is basically like a simple guided user interface. It would be presented with a set of questions, and based on your inputs, the tool recommends the best suited virtual machines for you. So do check out this tool, and again, you can access it at aka.ms/virtual machine selector. You should be able to like get access to this tool.
Thanks a lot, Priya. I'll move on to the next slide.
Yeah. All right. So, Rishabh, we talked about what are Azure virtual machines. We also covered about the Azure virtual machine portfolio. So let's talk about like what are the different ways to deploy the virtual machines in Azure.
Absolutely, Priya. And whenever I think about deployment, I just think about, in a naive sense, is which way am I going to get these machines? Like how do I get my hands on them, right? Today on Azure, we have three different ways to do that. The first method is Azure Portal. For folks who don't know, Azure Portal is essentially, if you Google it, you'll be able to see this wonderful user interface which guides you on how you're able to create your compute needs altogether. So think of this as a website where you can go and create your compute resources on demand. Similarly, for those who are tech savvy, they can use options 2 and 3. So the option 2 specifically is running it and trying to deploy your VMs via a script. So we have a dedicated sort of scripting tool, Azure CLI, which you can download. You can utilize Azure PowerShell. You can also utilize your simple Linux terminals. You can SSH into it from your PuTTY sessions. There's just so many ways to do it for those who are familiar with that method. And then finally, we've got this other sort of method along the same line, which we refer to as an ARM template. The ARM acronym here stands for Azure Resource Manager. Think this is sort of a file which is created for you. It's essentially a JSON file, and all you have to do is go and mention exactly what kind of resources you're trying to look for, and you can go ahead and deploy your VMs via these JSON files as well.
Awesome. So Rishabh, again, we have like several options here, right? Are there specific scenarios where we would recommend our users to choose like a portal versus a script? Can you actually talk to us a bit on that?
Absolutely, absolutely. And these three options kind of attract three different kinds of users, right? So Portal is for somebody who is trying to manually go and deploy a single or a couple of VMs. So, for users who don't really have a large sort of deployment need, who are looking for an easy to use interface, who might not be so tech savvy when it comes to using terminals and using ARM templates altogether. So Portal is, as I said, like it's a good way when you have like a sort of a short requirement. Please note you have our VMs available on all the capacity. All our portfolio is available through all these three platforms. But Portal is the sort of more attractive for customers who are trying to sort of just do a one-off deployment and may just maybe either new to the cloud or maybe trying to have just a small deployment altogether. Script and ARM template are sort of two more sort of widely adopted paths for customers who are using Azure VMs on a large scale. The reason for that is for those who are who are tech savvy, they really want to just automate the deployment, right? For customers who want to deploy 1,000 VMs, right? They would not go to Portal and deploy them individually. They would just write a script and try to do that automatically. And similarly, if I may just focus on the ARM template, right? Even on before going to the ARM template, a script would require you to you go and define exactly each kind of resource, each kind of VM product you're trying to do, right? On an ARM template, you can even automate that one step further. So rather than writing your own script, we give you a script to be able to use and consume direct. So all you have to do is just change change the VM requirements per your need, change the networking requirements, and essentially the ARM template does the rest for you.
Awesome. Yeah, we had a little bit of
And I
technical
think the last
glitch
comment.
there. Yeah, sorry.
Oh,
I'll
sorry,
just
again?
summarize quickly. A little technical
Please,
glitch,
please.
but just to summarize, folks, like Rishabh mentioned, so Portal is a very user-friendly way for you to actually learn about Azure virtual machines. If you're new to Azure, the Portal gives you kind of a user interface where you can actually navigate through different tabs and identify like what are the different settings you need to actually configure on a VM. So it gives you a very basic way to actually learn about Azure and how to create virtual machines. But if you're very familiar with what sort of virtual machines you need to use, and let's maybe say like what are the predefined configurations for your virtual machines, and if you're trying to actually deploy like tens and thousands of machines, the scripting and the ARM template is the way to go, and it comes very handy because it's very easy to do that way too. And so for the session today, Rishabh, we are going to specifically focus on deploying a VM through the Azure portal, right?
Yes, ma'am. And apologies again if folks have seen some technical difficulties from my end. But yes, you're absolutely right. Today, we'll be focusing on the most basic layer, given that this is a one-on-one session. So we'll be walking you over the Azure portal and the experience there. So stay put for the demo.
Awesome.
If I may move to the next slide.
Let's move on. Awesome. So let's dive into the session now. So we talked about, again, what are virtual machines, and we also touched briefly upon the resources of a virtual machine, right? So can you actually explain to our learners, like, what are the different components of a virtual machine? And let's dive into the details of like compute, storage, and networking aspects in it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Priya. And this is our goal, folks. Like our goal is to educate you on exactly each of the individual resources, right? So as I mentioned earlier, three main pillars: compute, storage, and networking. Starting with the first one, I think we covered this briefly, but essentially VMs, they give you CPU and memory resources, right? We talked about the different product portfolios we have to give you this variety of products in this space. The next vertical, which we'll jump right into after this slide as well, is going towards storage. Azure storage or just storage in general is a critical component of any sort of compute need. And today we'll be telling you in deep dive about how you can configure storage and virtual disks around it. So stay put for that as well. And then the third and the final pillar that we'll be covering today is our networking altogether. So in networking, we will, again, please stay put. We'll describe this in detail in the coming slides, but essentially the three main topics we'll be covering under the networking pillar is what a virtual network is, what a virtual network interface is, and finally, how do you configure your public IP and go around it. So hopefully, Priya, that gives you a quick summary, and hopefully to the audience, you know what you'll be learning shortly as well.
Yeah. So this sounds like you covered this very well when we initially started also, Rishabh. So just for folks to connect back, resources of a virtual machine typically is very similar to what you would own as a physical computer, right? So you have a compute resources, you configure the storage resources, which includes your data disk, and then you touched upon the OS disk there as well. And we also have network settings and the configurations for network with a public IP address for inbound and outbound communications. So folks, essentially you can think of a virtual machine, as we mentioned before, as a resource which you could actually own for your computing purposes, but you don't necessarily have to physically own it, and Azure serves it for you.
That's correct. If I may move to
Awesome.
the next slide.
Awesome. All right, so Vishab, so we didn't touch upon the OS image, right? So that's also an essential part to host your applications and workloads. So can you talk to us about that?
Absolutely. I think we touched on all the critical hardware components. Let's just quickly touch on sort of the software there as well.
Yeah.
So VM image, folks, is another sort of critical component, which comes as a software layer on top of your VMs, right? Similar to what a PC or a desktop's operating system is, a VM image is essentially the same thing for a virtual machine. As I said, it sort of covers different layers of operating systems available to the customer today. Different customers have different workloads, which have different affinity to the VM image, to the operating system altogether, and we have hopefully one for all your needs available on Azure Marketplace as well.
Awesome. So a question probably on behalf of our learners, Rishabh. So Azure offers a standard set of images. You mentioned that you could use the marketplace to actually pick up those images to load on your virtual machine. But what if our users need certain types of customizations for their applications, right? Do we have some way to do that as well in Azure?
Yeah. Great question, Priya. And for customers and for the audience members, if you go through our marketplace, you'll see thousands of VM images. And the majority of them are customized to different needs. But to answer your question, Priya, yes, customers have the ability to bring their own image. Think large organizations, they require certain workloads which has some sort of customization. They tend to develop their own image and bring it to Azure as well. So we give you that flexibility to bring your own image as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I always love the flexibility that Azure offers. It's awesome. And it's like, I feel like so good to have choices to choose from. I think our learners will actually appreciate it as well.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So yeah, again, we discussed about storage as a second pillar or a second component of the virtual machine. So Rishabh, can you talk to us about the different storage options in a virtual machine and how do we configure that?
Absolutely, Priya. And I think now we're getting into the details, right? So now we'll be jumping into the two pillars, storage and the networking aspects, a little bit more in details than we initially covered. So allow me to move to my next slide.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So folks, as everybody can imagine, right, storage is another critical component of your compute needs. And at Azure, we offer different flavors of storage that you can pick altogether. The first sort of decision that you'll have to make is to pick which kind of storage you need. Today in Azure, we offer the traditional hard disk. For folks who might be sort of on the younger side, they might not even know what HDDs are, but essentially these are the spinny disks that used to exist throughout, and actually physically moving. And whenever you needed to read and write, you would go and spin the disk and then complete your execution. And in addition to that, we've got those modern SSDs altogether, right? The solid state drives that you can pick. And then we've got some sort of premium products as well here, which is the premium SSD V1 and the premium SSD V2. And then for those workloads and customers who really want that super fast and that ultra performance, we've got an ultra disk product for you as well.
All right. Yeah, Rishabh. So you mentioned a couple of storage offerings here, right? Like standard HDD, standard SSD, and premium SSD V1, V2, and Ultra Disk. Can you talk to us about like specific use cases where each of these storage options will be best suited?
Absolutely, Priya. And allow me to move to my next slide to answer your question. And folks, yeah, the decision to pick the storage option is dependent on your compute needs. It's dependent on how your workload is designed and what kind of storage performance you're expecting, right? This table here does a wonderful job in explaining what kind of workloads which attract which kind of scenarios altogether, right? So if I may just quickly touch upon, like Ultra Disk, as the name implies, Ultra is hopefully self-explanatory, but the best of the best, right? It's an SSD which is attractive to workloads such as SAP HANA, top-tier databases, SQL workloads. So essentially think like high transaction workloads which require the optimal performances. And you can see some of the metrics that we've tried to give in the disk size, the disk throughput, IOPS, altogether, which come with the Ultra Disk. Similarly, premium SSD V2, which by the way is a new product from our team altogether, is just a notch below the Ultra Disk as well. This too can be attractive for certain sort of transaction-heavy workloads, but not as good as the Ultra Disk. So think workloads which require sort of low latency all the time, and this is a good candidate to be used in the production environment as well. Premium SSD is similar to premium SSD V2. V2 is just a newer version of that, which is just slightly performance enhanced. But again, this is another great candidate for a production environment use. Standard SSD, when I think about standard SSDs, I think sort of SSDs sitting on my PCs and my desktop. So you might not use a standard SSD for running your, like 1,000 VM production environment. You probably use it for a smaller use case for an application which is not that intensive, running certain workloads such as web servers, which are not really getting the highest of the highest traffic. And then finally, we've got standard HDD, which I made a joke earlier. These are the spinny disks. Essentially, when I think about HDD today, I think about backup, right? I think about archiving our application needs. So if you have applications which require to take frequent snapshots, frequent storage backups, HDDs are the good ones for you to use. And the performance degradation there is also expected because you're not really expecting that from your archives.
Yeah.
Does that help, Priya?
Yeah, it is like super clear actually right now, because now we know like there are different performance tiers associated with the different storage offerings we have, and the purpose and need to offer these, different options is super clear along with their use cases as well. So yeah, thank you for that. And then moving on, so when we discussed about the storage options, we also talked about operating system disk and temporary storage that comes along with the virtual machine, right? So what sort of storage options is suited for these two types of configurations? Can we also use the same type of disk for operating system and temporary storage?
Absolutely, Priya, and apologies. I think I clicked next on my slide a little too quickly before you finished. But essentially, the next step on your storage need is how do you map, right? Like what kind of storage you're expecting to your disks and how do they connect to your VMs altogether, right? So today in Azure, we use something called a virtual hard disk to configure them. It's essentially a way of saying that wherever your VM is deployed, right? Think about your VM is sitting in one region in an Azure data center somewhere in the world. The hard drive or the storage is actually not right next to the VMs unless you pick it right? So we configured them via these virtual hard disks mechanisms. To your virtual machines, you get your virtual hard drives all together. And we essentially have two different distinctions here. right? The first distinction is that there is something called the operating system disk. This is your primary C drive. For folks who might be further, so this is where your storage needs are stored if you're deploying a diskless VM. But we also give you an ability to utilize something called a temporary disk. Temporary disk, hopefully the name is self-explanatory, but these are essentially an extension of storage attached to your VMs. These are usually represented as the D drive, and it's an ideal location for storing your paging file. If you're interested in doing some sort of application caching, temporary disk are the way to go. But please note that if you stop your VM or if the VM crashes, temporary disk, as the name implies, you are sort of at risk of losing your data there altogether.
Got it. And so, Rishabh, what of the different storage options can our users choose for operating system and temporary disk? So we had like different options, right? The Ultra Disk, Premium SSD, V1, V2, and standard HDDs and SSD. So what options, are there like some kind of restrictions there, or are they allowed to choose anything that they would want to choose for operating system disk?
Great question. And again, Priya, our portfolio is so good, right? Like we have so many different flexibility, so many different ways we can give customer the options to pick from that. Depending on the customer's need, they have the ability to pick either diskless or disk-full VMs, and they can configure it based on their needs.
Got it. Yeah. And for the high tier performance workloads, we choose Ultra Disk. We recommend them choosing Ultra Disk or Premium SSD V2, but that may not be really required or supported for an operating system disk because it's too expensive as well, right? So we don't really recommend that. So that should be also something that our learners can just remember.
Yeah, good call out, Priya. And I think just to elaborate on that, so if you opt for the option, if I hover my mouse over it, if you go over the operating system disk, please note that these disks are only stored on Premium SSD and below. Premium SSD V2 and Ultra disks are not sort of safe for that, and you can only adopt them for temporary disk use only.
Got it. All right. Okay. Yeah, let's come to our last part of the storage configuration. So, Rishabh, when workloads or applications are maintained on-prem, it is generally managed individually by the owners, storage account owners. And how does that storage account management work in Azure?
Absolutely. And I think the last part, as you said, Priya, is our ability to configure the storage need, whether customers want to take the onus of managing them, or do they want to sort of outsource the onus of this management to Azure, to us, right? And today we offer both options. Again, just highlighting the flexibility that Azure gives you. If I may elaborate what an unmanaged disk is, right? So unmanaged disk, again, essentially implies that the onus of the disk management comes to the customer. This is where you have to basically take in charge and monitor your virtual hard drives, which are corresponding to your VMs altogether. Managed disk, which hopefully I'll try to market for here, is our sort of our newer offerings, which are the recommended disk storage model. Here, Azure takes the onus, as I mentioned earlier, essentially just taking away that burden of that storage management away from the customer. You can pick and choose the kind of disk you want, the size of the disk you want. We mentioned so many different products in the storage side that we have, so you can pick any of them, and then you don't have to even worry about the storage limits, right? So assuming that maybe you deployed a disk for 10 GB, and for some reason your application requires 15 GB, which you didn't really, we give customers the ability to scale up and down accordingly as well. And then the last comment I'll make is, of course, with the managed disk, you get a higher reliability, better security. So security stamp from Microsoft comes with it. And we also back up and take snapshots of the disks for you.
Yeah, that sounds like the managed disk is the way to go, right? So it comes with a lot of great benefits, folks, as Rishabh mentioned. You have the option with scaling up and scaling down in a less kind of a hassle-free way, basically. And it also comes with other great benefits, such as better reliability and security. So we do recommend you to choose managed disk as an option to get the great experience. Hopefully that.
May I move to the next slide, Priya?
Yes, please. All right, we are at the third component and the final component, which is as important, and it's important for keeping our our customers' workload secure. So let's dive into the network concepts. And can you talk to us about what are the different firewall rules and settings that we can configure on a VM?
Absolutely. And this is another important vertical as we talked about, Priya. So let's jump right into it, right? I think when it comes to networking, let's begin with what a network security group is, or NSG as we refer to them as. First things first, whenever you think about networking configuration, you have to configure a network security group for your VM. I use this analogy all the time whenever explaining it to folks, but I essentially think of this as let's say that you want to enter a house, right? When you enter a house, you have a key to the main door. And then when you actually enter the house, there is a key to each individual rooms in the house as well, right? You might want to give the key of the main door to one individual, but you might want to restrict them entry into a certain room of the house, right? That really gives you that flexibility. A network security group, in some sense, is doing exactly the same. It's essentially defining network security group rules, which helps you allow or deny traffic into certain components of the application altogether, where the VM can communicate externally, internally. All of those rules are defined and sort of put in stone in the network security group when you deploy your VM altogether.
Awesome. Yeah, that's actually a wonderful analogy, Rishabh. So, and thank you for actually explaining it in a very simple, layman kind of a language, right? Because I know like our participants today, our learners are going to be like probably a little bit of beginners to the cloud or beginners in Azure. So, that's very important that the concepts actually are very understandable to them. So, thanks for that super clear explanation. And so, you talked to us about the network security group and the different rules. So can you talk to us more about like how to configure the firewall settings?
Absolutely. Yeah, coming to that, I think I briefly touched upon the network security. If I transition away from the network security groups, the other component which I briefly mentioned earlier is something with my analogy is something called a VNet or a virtual network, right? I gave you the analogy of being able to enter into different rooms of a house altogether.
Yes.
Virtual nets are essentially the different rooms that we have in this analogy, right? So different areas where we can control the traffic flow based on your configurations that you set. To answer your question, Priya, like about the firewall rules, I think whenever I think about network security or network sort of configurations for a VM, I think about 3 steps, and my next few slides kind of showcase that, right? So if I may move to the next one, step 1, whenever you think about a VM sort of network configuration, the first step is to configure these NSGs, as I mentioned earlier, right? Again, you can open or block traffic based on the VNet. So you can open a room or the house based on, using my poor analogy, you can use that, use virtual networks to be able to open or block traffic altogether. And you have the ability to configure them through all the deployment methods we have. Step 2 is, as I said, so Azure VMs by default are locked, right? So anybody trying to connect to them externally will not have the ability to do so. So you have to go and open those ports yourself. We do this for security reasons. So we make sure that folks know what they're trying to do before they're able to do it as well. If you have external applications, they can make requests to your VMs once you open these ports altogether. And then finally, I think for folks who understand networking, they'll know that only inbound traffic is allowed from the virtual network, right? And we have certain additional capabilities such as load balancers, which we'll not cover in this forum, but just know that you have these additional layers which you can adopt later as well. And then finally, the third, to answer Priya your question, is essentially we've got other two groups as well, right? Like we mentioned that you need to create your network security group altogether. The key thing to note here is all sort of inbound rules are sort of defined on port 20 and 21. This is where you're doing your file transfer protocol use. If you have some sort of files that you want to sort of move around between different layers of the application, these are the ports you're communicating on.
Got it. So a quick question, Rishabh. So again, like on behalf of our audience, I'd like to ask this. So we walked through the different types of network settings and configurations. And for folks who are like very new to launching a virtual machine, right? Are there like specific default mandatory settings that they should keep in mind when configuring the networking part?
Absolutely, Priya, and there are a lot of settings, and we'll sort of go over briefly in our demo as well. But I think the key thing to note is whenever you're deploying a VM, the default settings are set for you. So for folks who may not be so familiar with it, just know that the base is done for you. And of course, those who are sort of the active and tech-savvy customers, they will have the ability to configure it based on your needs. So you have the ability
so
to
we
change
have
your
that covered.
ports. Yep.
Okay, got it. Awesome. We have a question from our audience, so I'd like to actually bring that up. I want to open a website page on Azure VM and provide access to that VM to a group of 200 plus people. They will just log into the VM and see if I posted any messages in the page. What do I need to do?
Yeah, I'm not sure I fully understand the question there, but if the question is around the ability to sort of create a simple web server on a virtual machine, I think that the steps that we briefly touched upon is, of course, trying to pick the right VM based on the kind of traffic you're expecting. You mentioned you're expecting 200 plus people. That's a big traffic. So picking the right VM with the right configurations. And then making sure you touch upon your network security closely as well. So one thing that I can recommend looking into is the network security group, which I recommended, which I touched upon earlier. The reason for that is if you expect an application where you're seeing external traffic come in, right? The question implies that there will be 200 people trying to log in here. That means that we have to open the ports appropriately. We want to make sure that those network security group rules are set appropriately as well.
And then to load balancer traffic, we also briefly touched upon the load balancer. So maybe that's another thing that you could check out. We will not get into the details of that in this demo, but I think we will also help you to understand how to launch a web server or any sort of an application on a VM as part of this demo. So it should still be helpful, I guess. Hopefully that answers the question. All right. So we have come to the demo, and Rishabh, we're going to see everything we learned so far in action, right? And I'm actually very excited for this. I'm sure our learners are looking forward to it as well. Should we get started?
Absolutely, Priya. And we have a little snip in here where I'm hovering my mouse, which is the NVMe. So before we jump into the demo, may I request you to educate us on the NVMe? I know you're the expert here.
Of course, yeah. So we could move to the, thank you, Rishabh. So folks, NVMe actually stands for Non-Volatile Memory Express. And this is a storage protocol that is developed to offer faster remote storage performance or any sort of a storage performance, basically. And typically the standard or the VMs that exist in Azure today, they use the SCSI protocol, which is called Small Computer System Interface. It's one of the legacy protocols. And Azure has introduced this NVMe support in a VM family. It's called EPS v5 series. And this series basically is supported with NVMe to offer faster remote storage IOPS and remote storage throughput performance. And just to connect back to what Rishabh mentioned a few slides back, so EBS v5 or a bunch of the E-series VM that we discussed is specifically designed and recommended for workloads which are memory intensive, like which needs to run like large database servers and or data analytical applications which demand that remote storage performance, right? So we could actually use these VMs for that. And folks, this VM, EBS v5, is also available in preview, so you could actually test it out yourself. There is a sign up link available on the screen where you can actually sign up and get access to this VM. And Rishabh, we are going to use this VM series for our demo today to also demonstrate to our learners on how to set this NVMe setting on this VM.
Absolutely, Priya. And I know this is one of the products that you recently launched, so we're very excited. But if
it's very close to my heart, definitely.
Yeah, it's very close to your heart. And if I may just summarize what I learned from your explanation is essentially whenever we required super fast IOPS and throughput, so the super fast sort of performance on IOPS and throughput, NVMe is the way to go. Did I capture that correctly, Priya?
Yes, that's perfect. That's exact, yeah.
Absolutely. And folks, just for those who are following us along in the Learn Live module, just know that this particular aspect is an extra credit. So you might not see this on the Learn Live session, but if you're trying to follow it, but everything else would be the same. So we just try to make this plug.
Yeah, thanks for the call out. Yeah, that's correct, Rishabh.
Okay, I'll move on to the next slide. So Priya, I think we're both excited to go into the demo. Can you tell us what's in it? I think we'll be following your lead here.
Yeah. So for folks who are actually wanting to do the demo along with us, so you could actually log into the Learn module. Again, you can access the module at aka.ms/learnlive-2022-1201A, or you can scan the QR code to get access to that Learn module. And we will be following the steps that is covered in the Unit 3 of the Learn modules, which is actually the Create a VM section. And so in this demo, basically, we're going to see everything that we have learned so far in action, like I mentioned. We will start off with logging into the Azure portal, Rishabh, and then we're going to walk our learners through the different tabs that is available in the Azure portal, which is essentially the different resources or components that we will configure as part of creating a virtual machine. So we'll go through the different tabs, we'll configure the settings, we'll start off with the compute resource tab, and then we'll configure the data disk, the OS disk, the storage management account, the network settings that you wonderfully explained with a great analogy. And then we will finally also show how to set the NVMe option on the VM, which people can actually choose if they're trying to use the EBS v5 series. And finally, we will review the settings and deploy the VM. So let's jump right in.
Fantastic. I think we're going towards the live aspect of the Learn Live session. So let's do it. I will escape my presentation mode and go to Azure portal right away. Folks, here, as you can see, what I did is I created an account and I am on the sort of the create a resource page on Azure portal. Priya, I'll let you guide me from here onwards.
Yeah, so folks, as you can see, there are different options available to create the different resources for you, but we are going to focus on create virtual machine. So Rishabh, let's click on create button, the create link on the virtual machine.
Right here.
Yep.
Always love doing live presentations on a big public forum. All right.
Great.
So I see a lot of things happening here, Priya. Can you guide me? What am I seeing here?
Yeah, so there are a bunch of tabs here, as you can see. The basics tab is where you would actually choose the compute resources, the configurations that we discussed about, what VMs you'd like to choose, what regions you're going to deploy your VMs on. Do you want to actually replicate your VMs for like redundancy and availability purposes? You could also choose the specific VM size, and you could then choose the OS image option that Rishabh explained as we were actually discussing about the resource components. So all of that actually comes into the basics tab. The disk tab, as you can see, it is the way to actually configure your data disk and your operating system disk. And the networking tab is where you're going to actually set your network configurations. The management tab helps you to choose between the managed storage account or the unmanaged account that we also briefly saw earlier. There is also a monitoring tab, which you can actually set on how to monitor your virtual machine logs and your other activities that actually runs on your virtual machine. And the advanced tab is where we're going to see about the NVMe setting. And there is a tags where you can actually tag your resources of your virtual machine. And finally, final step is to review and create the virtual machine. So Rishabh, let's just get started with the basics tab.
Absolutely. So we're on the basics tab already.
Okay. So we start off with choosing the
I think
subscription.
let's go one by one on the things.
Okay, yeah. Let's start off choosing the subscription, and then
I have a subscription selected.
Yeah, and then we go into a resource group. So you have to enter a resource group for your set of resources that gets deployed as part of your virtual machine. Yep. Okay, we have a test resource group created,
I had
and
then ability to just create a test resource group before on. So
okay,
I'll
awesome.
go ahead and give a virtual machine name as well.
Okay. And then you choose a region.
Which region do we want to deploy?
Yep. Yeah, for this specific VM. Yes, Rishabh. For this specific VM, let's choose US West Central. That's where this VM is available. So let's choose US West Central. And the availability options for the purposes of the demo, we could actually leave it as no redundancy required. And standard security type is all good. And the image, let's choose, since this is a Windows-based demo, Windows Azure Virtual Machines demo, let's choose Windows Server 2019 Gen 2. And then we're going to choose the EBSv5 VM size.
Absolutely. Priya, if I may just add on that, like this is what the VM images we were talking about, and there are so many, right? Customers have the ability to bring their own as well. The other aspect of a new, which signifies the VM architecture, because now we also have new ARM-based VMs, which we'll make a plug for towards the end as well. And now, Priya, going to your point, let me just click on See All Sizes.
Mm-hmm. And this is where you have the option to choose, pick and choose the virtual machine series from different families, like the memory optimized family, which is the E series. And we're going to choose one of the EBSv5 VMs for our demo today. So let's choose any size.
Okay, I'll pick the smallest one.
Okay, the next one is disk.
And it's nice, and it shows me my cost as well. Yeah, I think the last quick factor I'll make is the ability to essentially just create an account what I'll be using to log in. So I'll just give it some basic password.
Yep.
Okay, and then I'll quickly give this as well. And I think it does some sort of information on the networking aspect as well. So you can select allow sort of inbound public ports as well. I'll just pick the default settings here, and then it also gives you the ability to RDP, which I'll showcase in just a second. And for licensing, you have the ability and the flexibility to bring your own licensing if you require as well. So Priya, I'll move to disks. What am I doing here?
So here we're going to actually choose the OS disk and the data disk. For the OS disk, again, as we saw before, we have multiple options available as from the storage side, but let's leave it default, which is the premium SSD, locally redundant storage is the option that we would leave. And let's move on to configure our data disk. There is a create and attach data disk option there. All right, so we have a name.
I see a 1 terabyte disk here already. So shall we go ahead and pick this one?
Sure.
Go ahead and hit. Okay.
I think that's
all right. Looks like our disk is attached.
Yes, let's go to the networking tab. And here, folks, as we discussed, as Rishabh mentioned before, you have the ability to configure and update your network settings. But for the purposes of this demo, we're going to leave the default settings. And you can just still review the settings in detail later. We could move on now, Rishabh, with these basic settings. So here is the storage account where you select your storage account as a managed option.
Yeah, folks, like this is what we talked about, managed and unmanaged, and similarly, we'll just pick default choices here. Just know that Azure has you covered for that initial launch. Priya, if it's okay, I'll skip the monitoring tab, and if I may jump
Yeah.
to the advanced tab, does that sound okay?
Yeah, that sounds good. So you scroll all the way down, and here is where you have the NVMe setting, which we essentially talked about for the higher remote storage IOPS and throughput performance. So Rishabh, why don't we click on the NVMe checkbox?
Absolutely. And Priya, I can
Yeah.
see that this is in preview, so we're trying something extremely new here as well.
Exactly. So
Okay.
yeah,
May
that
I
setting
go
is
towards
pretty,
review
yeah.
and create?
Yeah, that setting is pretty straightforward. And then we go into review and create.
Give this a second. Usually takes just a quick second.
Yeah, all the validations passed, which is great. So we have our settings rightly configured.
I was keeping my fingers crossed there.
So we could click on, yeah. So folks, before you actually even like create, again, there is a product detail section there, which talks to you about the pricing details for the VM that you chose. So you could review that, and then we could click create, Rishabh. I think we're all good.
Okay. Yeah, and as soon as you hit create, folks, it gives you a quick sort of rundown on all the sort of the validations that you're trying to do. And it will essentially showcase whether the deployment was a pass or a success. So we'll just give a second. I do have a backup deployment in case, but if we run into any sort of challenges, I'll try to show. Looks like we are good. Oh, there we go.
Awesome. The deployment is in progress. And folks, as you can see,
Folks,
you
so
would actually,
yeah, please go ahead.
sorry, go ahead, Rishabh. It's okay.
No, I was going to say, Priya, like, I think the beauty is that sitting from Seattle, we've just launched a compute resource in US West Central. I'm not sure exactly where the Microsoft data center is, but it's somewhere in that region. And the reason why it's taking just a second is because of that, right? So we're, the hypervisor, the allocator is just finding us the right hardware server and creating the size that we selected, creating compute resources, the network resources,
Exactly.
the disk resources, and essentially creating that. And as you see, we are successful. So let's just quickly go to the resource. All right. As folks can see, my Learn Live demo virtual machine is essentially ready. Now you can see that the start button is sort of shaded because it has been started. And
yeah, there is a status running as well, which
and I think the other comment I'll make is as soon as you go ahead and click connect, you have many different ways to connect to the VM as well. We talked about its deployment earlier as well. So you can bring in your terminals, you can bring in your other sort of methods to connect to your PuTTY sessions. But today we'll be picking RDP just for a second. Yeah, so if you hit RDP, it will automatically showcase some sort of public IP, and you can download the RDP file together, and you can see that my PC had a quick RDP file downloaded as well. Once you click on it, you have to do some quick configurations because initially, if you remember, we did, let me show that, right? It comes on my other screen. But what we did is we basically set up a username and password. So whatever username and password we selected in the basics tab, you have to enter that again here. I'll click cancel here because for folks who are following us, please feel free to proceed here. But I'll quickly click cancel here because I actually have, oh, never mind, it went down. So let me just go ahead and do this again. There we go. So we are here. Let's hit connect. And there is something loading on my screen. As you can see, my computer is trying to be a little smart and use my webcam to recognize my face, but I want to use a different aspect because I created a new username here. The password that we entered. And as soon as you enter that, it gives you a warning. It's saying like, hey, are you sure you want to connect to this? So this is a Windows security feature. I'll say, yes, I like this. So let's go ahead and click yes. As soon as you click yes, you have this wonderful new tab come in. Folks, this is your VM. Let me just expand this altogether. It's basically, think of this as booting up your PC or your desktop. So there you go, voila.
Yeah.
And then you have you have the ability to configure, use this as you want. I think the question that was asked to us, if you're running a website, this is where you do your application deployment. This is your server, and as you can see, the server manager opened up automatically. You have the ability to monitor your server resources directly. So I'll not go into that, but if I may just quickly show just a quick My PC overview. Priya, if you remember, we deployed a disk altogether. This is where this disk that you deployed, you see altogether. So folks, hopefully you appreciate the beauty of this on-demand compute resource creation. Priya, if it's okay, may I go back to my slide, or do we want to cover anything else here?
No, we're good. So it's nice to see everything again, like in reality, right? Whatever we learned. So we configured a VM, and then we saw the deployment was successful. We successfully connected to the remote VM. And then we also saw the different disk configurations that we have made on the VM. So the network connection is successful. Everything is great. And I hope it's actually insightful, and our learners also enjoyed seeing that.
Absolutely. One last call out I'll make, Priya, is we actually attached a 1 terabyte disk. And the reason that you don't see that disk here just yet is because you actually have to initialize it, right?
Exactly.
So for folks who are paying really close attention, we're not trying to run away. Just know that you actually have to initialize that particular disk. And once you do that, you'll see another temporary storage pop here already. Okay, I will go ahead and minimize and perhaps even close the VM and go back to my slides. All enjoyed the demo, and there was some good learning here.
So folks, if you have any questions, again, please keep coming. We'll try to address it in the chat. All right, Rishabh. Yeah, so let's get back to our launch session again. So we discussed about availability, right? So availability of an application or service is a critical aspect, and I'm sure it's important for our customers to keep their applications available, and they have strong SLA agreements that they would need to meet with their customers. So if it's important for our customers, it's important for us as well. So how can customers and users manage the availability of their virtual machines in Azure?
Absolutely, Priya. I was actually just skimming through the comments, and looks like we had a lot of comments, which, sorry, I kind of overlooked. But if I may just quickly address a few of them. I think we've got one question from Lakshmi Prabhakar. She says, how do I allow a friend to just randomly, sorry, let me read that again. How do I allow a friend to read-only access to a VM? Lakshmi, that's a great question. You have the ability to configure accesses of external party to your VM based on your network security groups that we talked about. Again, the NSGs allow you to configure that, and you have the ability to give read-only or write-only accesses based on your needs to your VM. I think your question was more implying towards the application or the storage needs, not a VM per se. Like, they will not be able to read your VM. They will be able to read or write on your storage or networking requirements. So thought I'd just quickly address one quick question before moving forward.
Awesome.
Okay, Priya, to your question on managing availability, let's move on to the next slide.
Sure.
If we play, right, like for us, the success of us at the time they want, right? So we have SLAs, so service level agreements, and we want to make sure that we attain to them all the time, right? So let me just give a quick definition. What is availability, right? I think it's really 101. Availability is the amount of time a service is available. For example, if Rishabh wants to deploy a VM at 2 a.m. at night, Rishabh has the ability to do so, right? So that is essentially how we define availability as. Finally, I think whenever we think about availability on Azure running, VMs running on Azure, again, we deployed a VM in US West Central. When I think about availability for Azure VMs, I think of, does US West Central actually have those servers that my VM or my compute needs to essentially have that on-demand deployment, right? So that's how I process that information. And folks who are sort of want to go like maybe one step above, is we have a couple of additional topics where I'll just leave the links to here, but these are additional deployment modules. The deployment modules are Azure Virtual Scale Sets. So again, this is going a little advanced, but scale sets are essentially ability to manage and load groups of VMs together. And then the ability to sort of scale up and down based on your needs. And Azure Load Balancer, as Priya mentioned earlier. So I think the first question that we covered was, hey, I have a large website, a lot of people are logging in, the traffic might get hard, or the traffic might get really high. Azure Load Balancer would be something that you want to look into to be able to manage that. Hopefully, Priya, that explains that. May I move?
Yeah, thanks for that, Rishabh. And just to add on, folks, you could also use the Azure Load Balancer with the availability set or an availability zone to improve your application's resiliency. Again, we're not getting into the details of that, but you can think of availability zone as something like a physically separate, distinct zone, which has distinct power source that helps you to actually retain the availability of your service. And availability set is essentially a way of grouping your virtual machines that helps Azure to understand how to actually make, how you're actually tackling the redundancy of your workload and your application. So all of these can be combined with the load balancer, and we have those links available in the session. So feel free to actually read through more of that and equip yourself. Rishabh, before we actually move on, I see a question in the chat again from Lakshmi asking if there is a way for them to actually try out the demo, or is it just kind of a watch session, this one. So Lakshmi, just to answer that, so there is a Learn Live link that we posted in the screen. So you could actually access this module to try out the demo yourself. And there should be an option for you called Activate Sandbox. So the sandbox is the option which Azure actually creates, in which Azure creates a temporary subscription for you to try out the steps that we actually demonstrated to you to create a virtual machine. And you have access to this for about an hour after you've actually created and activated it. So you could still play around for an hour after you try out the demo, the virtual machine demo itself. So get access to that module and you should be able to try it out.
Absolutely. No, thanks, Priya. And Lakshmi, as I said initially, I think if this were happening in person, we'd be sitting next to you and trying to guide you. But given that it's remote, we've given you the ability to have this sandbox available to you. So you don't have to create an Azure account. You don't need a credit card. You have the ability to just go and deploy this temporary time frame for 2 hours, and you can deploy a VM to follow along.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll move to the next slide.
Awesome. Yeah. So let's talk about the backup, recovery, and other options that's available in Azure. So this is again like a key component of maintaining and planning the deployment of your applications for our customers, right? So what options does Azure have in terms of like backup and recovery services, Rishabh?
Absolutely, Priya. And these are one of those, options to think about when you're essentially like trying to be safe with your applications, right? You're trying to make sure your applications, the application data. We looked at examples of running a website where nothing's lost, right? So this is us trying to just alert that make sure you back up your VMs, make sure you don't end up losing something you don't want to, right? If I may give another analogy, is whenever I'm writing a document on Word, I want to make sure that I'm saving it, right? So this is the same analogy there. But folks, yeah, data backup and recovery is critical, right? Like for it's okay to lose some data if you're just trying out in a live session, but when you're running an application server at a large scale, trying to host 1,000 of customers, you want to make sure your application upkeep and your data recovery is 100% of the time, right? So today, the files and folders on Windows OS machines, like when we talk about the C drive that I initially mentioned to, all those files will be available to you even if the VM goes down. Application-aware snapshots, you have the ability to take those different snapshots and or different backups from different parts of the application that you're running. And then finally, we have Microsoft has so many database servers, so many things like services such as SharePoint, Exchange. We have the ability to take snapshots as well. If I may give a quick sort of this visual on the right, like this is a nice view to show that, hey, when you deploy your VM, you're actually in this, this environment that you just created. So all your files, your folders, if you're running a server or a SharePoint, it's all within this square, right? But if you opt for backing up your VM, all that information is backed up from a environment which is different from your own environment. Just because if this environment goes down, you have the ability to just quickly fetch it from this other environment and then just pick it up where you left it from.
Awesome. That's like super helpful, Rishabh. So what is Azure Backup service? How is it different from like a traditional backup option? So is there something different, or like can they be used like together? Can you talk to us about that?
Absolutely. Allow me to move to my next slide. So let me try to market Azure Backup as well. A lot of benefits that come with Azure Backup. First of all, I think, folks, as you may know, you have the ability to do the backups yourself, right? Azure Backup is a managed backup service. Again, so it gives you automatic storage management. So it will do all the sort of the burden. It will take that burden of storage management away from you. Unlimited scaling. Scaling is critical. I think I gave an example earlier, like if you expect 10 GB of data for your application, but the application storage need goes above that, Azure Backup will scale that above as well. If you're doing this manually, you'll have to use a larger drive that you'll have to bring in yourself. Multiple storage offerings. So we have a lot of storage options. You can either pick to take a storage option in the same region, or if the data is really critical, you can create different backups in different regions. This is we're very proud to have that as well. Unlimited data transfer, data encryption if privacy is a big need. Application consistent backup. So depending on the applications you have, we make sure that there are recovery snapshots at each different point. And then finally, long-term retention. If I may give a fun fact, I used Azure like almost 3 years ago. And I created an application which I ended up deleting at the time. And now, even today, I can go and fetch that information. So it just keeps that information as a metadata for a long term if you pick to do so.
Yeah. And the cool thing, again, just to add on to what Rishabh mentioned, Azure Backup as a service is something that you can actually use irrespective of where your data resides. It can be like on-prem or it can be on cloud. So you could actually use this as a service for your backup and recovery solutions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If I may move to the next slide, and I see we are 12 minutes to our slot. Finally, but use Azure Backup whenever you're deploying your VM. That's what we're trying to sell here, and essentially, you have the ability to do so in different formats as well. So I'll just list it down a few ways that it's available to you.
Awesome.
Okay, I will move to the next slide.
All right, so Rishabh, we've almost reached towards the end of our session, but before we wind up, why don't we give to our learners a brief overview of the different pricing models in Azure? And can you also talk to us about how the compute and storage pricing models are?
Absolutely. I think pricing is one of the most important aspects, right? We talked about so many things, so many pricing.
Yeah, there are some technical glitches here.
So, folks, today
we're good now.
Can you hear me? Okay.
We can hear you, Rishabh.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, folks. I have to make a complaint. Yeah, I have to make a complaint to my office Wi-Fi people today. So please excuse me for that. So, folks, yeah, two pricing models. Today we have the easiest way the easiest mechanism is pay as you go. This mechanism, as the name implies, is you're essentially paying by the hour or the day or the month as you go and deploy a VM. If you saw the demo, we were actually paying by the hour. So we ended up paying 2 cents per hour for the VM that we deployed. You would pick this option where you don't have a long-term commitment, right? Where you're trying to just test, deploy, maybe run some certain subset of the application as a dev test environment, and you want to just have this availability at your demand at a very small price, right? You can deploy, as I said, the VM for 2 cents for the hour. So if I want to just quickly develop something on the Azure cloud, I can quickly use pay as you go altogether. The next option is reserved virtual machine instances. Reserved virtual machine instances, or RIs as we like to call them. So RI standing for reserved instances. These are sort of long-term commitments, right? And with long-term commitments, you get better discounts as well. So you can save up to 70% if you commit for a longer time. Basically, I think, Priya, when we were practicing this session, I gave you this analogy of, going to an apartment and signing a lease, right? You're signing a lease for 12 months, right? Rather than paying by the month, you pay a higher price.
Exactly.
Yeah, and if you sign a longer lease, you'd pay a smaller price, right? So again, RIs are extremely flexible. Let's say that even if you sign this quote-unquote lease, we have the ability to exchange and give you a very good termination fee. But we always recommend our customers to go towards RI as it's beneficial for both them and us. Essentially, if you decide that you want to opt out, we can sort of replace that with some other access offer altogether.
Awesome. And then why don't we touch about how the storage and the compute resources are getting charged? So these pricing models are very specific to compute, I suppose. Can you elaborate a little bit on that for our learners?
Yeah, good question, Priya. And I think my Wi-Fi is again giving up on me, but folks, please bear with me. But Priya, the point that you're trying to make is, please note that the pricing model that I've mentioned in this, the VM virtual machine compute needs are separate from the storage needs. Whatever VM you deploy, the VM will have its own cost. And if you attach a disk like we did in the demo, please note that disk will have a separate cost. So that will be built under storage needs separately.
That's correct. And just to add on, folks, if you're trying to actually stop or deallocate your VM, make sure that the storage disk is also removed or deleted, because it has no relation and you might still get incurred like some amount of storage cost, even though your VM is deleted. So just something that you can remember while you're removing or deleting a VM that you created.
Absolutely. And moving to the last part, I think, and we are just 7 minutes to our end as well. I think, Priya, shall we go ahead and maybe do one of the two knowledge checks? What do you think?
Yeah. Yes, let's do one quickly at least.
Yeah. So, folks, as you can see on the screen, there is a link. We'd like you to maybe open the link, and if you'd like, we'd love to hear from you, just so that we know that we were able to communicate the learnings well as well. Feel free to scan the QR code or go to the link to vote. But allow me to read the question. Right? The question is: suppose you want to run a network appliance on a virtual machine. Which workload option would you choose? The options are A, general purpose, B, compute optimized, C, memory optimized, and D, storage optimized. And we'll open the poll, and folks, please feel free to vote as well. And Priya, while we wait for the results, if I may ask you, right? So network appliances, what sort of workload does that come to your head?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to what we learned with you so far. So I know, like Rishabh, you talked to us about the different types of application scenarios or workloads that are best suited for certain types of machines. So I definitely feel that it's not general purpose because there is a network appliance requirement here. So so it means that my workload is actually going to require higher network performance. So I would like to eliminate general purpose, but I also think that compute optimized may be the best suited option here for applications that require higher CPU performance and network appliance performance needs. So I would actually go with compute optimized. And let's see what our learners asked. Let's see what our learners voted for.
Yeah, I'm not sure we have the ability to, maybe we can. Let me see if I can open it. And I think we're running short on time as well. So folks, we'll try to just quickly wrap up after this poll. Okay, we're getting some amazing vote. And I think, so just to read out, I think we have 20% of the votes on option A, 60% on option B, 0% on option C, and 20% on option D. I think, folks, you're listening good. So I'm really happy. If I may move optimize to you, and thank you for hearing us out and learning with us. With that, I'll just skip over the second question and try to close the loop. We had a second question as well in case we had time. So Priya, if I may I please request you to summarize the learnings that we had today in this nice session?
Yeah, sure, Rishabh. So, folks, first of all, thank you for joining us today, and thank you for staying through the session as well. So, to summarize, we talked about what are Azure virtual machines, and we also discussed with you the different components or the three pillars that are associated with creating a virtual machine. We walked you through the different options to create and deploy virtual machine, and we went through a demo of creating a Windows virtual machine through the Azure portal and with the NVMe capability or setting that is available for accelerated remote storage performance. And then we also discussed with you about the availability options and backup and recovery services that is available in Azure to administer your virtual machine. And finally, we wrapped up with the pricing models that's in Azure. So once again, thank you for joining us today. And we hope that you found the session helpful to understand about the fundamentals of Azure virtual machines. Usha, would you like to add anything?
No, absolutely, Priya. I think the last thing I'll say is, Learn Live is really good. We only covered the 101 session on introduction to Azure VMs. So feel free to check out this website. Again, you scan this QR code, or even if you Google Learn Live Azure, you'll see this link pop up. And then the last plug I'll make is we've got another Learn Live session coming from our team. This is going to be on December 8th, so just a week from now. So if your schedule allows, please do join this as well. We'll be very happy to have you, and in that we'll be focusing more on the Linux side. My colleagues are doing this, so I'm sure they'll be able to help you learn as well. And I think with that, we will finish. We'll say thank you so much for hearing us out, and thank you, Priya, for being a wonderful co-host, and we hope all the audience enjoyed this together.
Yeah, thank you, Rishabh. I enjoyed, and I hope your audience enjoyed as well.
Okay, thank you.